Colonel Sergei, the head of a strict regime colony, was in a state of intense emotional turmoil. Not knowing what to do to calm his frayed nerves, he did incompatible things. He downed 100 grams of vodka in one gulp, along with a powerful sedative. But that was not the end of it. His head began to split open from unbearable, hellish pain. It seemed like his sanity was clouded, and this clouding completely obliterated his conscience, humanity, and awareness of what he was doing. In this very state, just a few minutes ago, he heartlessly sent his 16-year-old stepdaughter Sophia, inherited from his late wife Nadia, to the cell with the prisoners. His wife had died a year ago, suddenly, from a heart attack. House neighbors whispered quietly about how Sergei, with his brazen behavior, had driven the woman into the grave. The girl struggled with the death of her mother, crying into her pillow. On Saturdays, Sophia went to her mother's grave, and on Sundays, she went to church. She prayed tirelessly for her mother's soul that had flown to another world. Sophia barely remembered her father. Her mother said he disappeared without a trace during a hunting trip in the woods and never returned. Stepfather Sergei was a stern, strict, and even cruel man, so the relationship with the stepdaughter did not develop well. Initially, there was dislike, gradually turning into hatred. The stepfather repeated all the time, "I have my own son, and I don't need someone else's child." In 10 years of living with Sergei and her mother, the girl could never bring herself to love her stepfather and saw him as a stranger she had to endure. She never fully understood why her mother married such a heartless man. Her mother said it was because of poverty, but how can one live without love? Sophia's childish mind refused to accept this. Stepfather considered the girl an unnecessary burden, a burden he, like a slave, had to bear for at least another 2 years, so they lived like two indifferent people to each other. Only Denis, Sergei's son, diluted this invisible confrontation. It seemed surprising, but Sophia had developed a good relationship with him. Denis valued his friendship with Sophia, understanding that life was not easy for her. He consistently defended the girl from unjust, angry attacks from her father. However, Denis went away to study in another city, leaving Sophia alone with her stepfather, who could not, or rather did not want to understand her. Sophia dreamt of one thing: to get a job after finishing school, have her own means of existence, and move out from her stepfather. Usually reserved, the stepfather came home today late, in a state of unrestrained excitement. He then argued with someone on the phone for a long time, and after some time, he grimly shouted at Sophia just 2 words: "Get ready immediately." Sophia desperately resisted when she realized what was happening. She was led down the long corridor to the cell with the criminals. The girl's heart sank, and a terrible premonition struck her. She wouldn't leave here alive. "No, Sergei Ivanovich, please. What terrible thing have I done to you? Don't ruin me," she begged, looking at her stepfather's crazed face and clinging to his hand. He, in an indifferent, icy tone, replied, "Go, work for the family, be useful for something. You are a stranger to me, and I'm not obligated to support you for the rest of your life." Sergei said indifferently, closed the door to the cell, and then went to his office, slumped in his chair, recalling all the events that preceded this terrible act. Just this morning, when the colonel arrived at work, the phone rang immediately, sounding like thunder on a clear day. Who could be calling so early in the morning? Sergei's face distorted in a displeased grimace. He was ready to hear anything, but not this. "Well, boss, didn't expect a call so early, huh?" Someone's rough, mocking voice spoke on the other end of the line. "Come on, cough up. Your son owes us a lot of money. Today, the debt is already 5 million rubles. He lost in cards, and he doesn't want to pay back. He said you'll pay. In short, you have a week. And don't think about protesting. My man will be watching you. He's an authority in your colony. Don't dare to deceive us. If you don't pay the debt, you'll pay with your head, and not just yours. Who are you who?" Sergei shouted with all his might. "Doesn't matter who. Get the money ready." "But I don't have that much money right now," Sergei prayed. "Those are your problems. Sell your apartment, car, whatever else you have. I'm not here to teach you." After such statements, the colonel was not just bewildered, but in wild shock. It seemed to him that he had lost the ability to think rationally. Denis, his son from the first marriage, a smart, responsible boy. An excellent student, he graduated from school with a gold medal. And now, he's studying at a prestigious university. Just a moment. If you want to see more stories like this, please subscribe to this channel and share this video with your friends. Thank you. No harmful habits, let alone a penchant for card games, he never had. And Dinas is an honest guy. If something happened to him, he would definitely let me know. Sergei comforted himself, but he still couldn't suppress the trembling in his body. With trembling hands, he dialed his son's phone number. What if I don't know something? Maybe Dinas got involved with a bad crowd. And it all went downhill, the colonel worried. "Hey, Dad," Dinas cheerfully answered his father's call. "Dennis, are you okay? Do you have enough money for everything?" "Yes, Dad, everything's fine, I'm studying." "Of course there's enough money. You always provide for me. And if there's ever a problem, I can always turn to you." "Why such questions? Did something happen?" The colonel hesitated, not knowing what to say. He didn't want to believe in something bad, and he actively rejected such thoughts. "Yeah, no son, nothing happened," muttered Sergei, "just wanted to hear from you." "Oh, I see," said Dinas. "It's not very convenient for me to talk right now. I'm in a lecture at the institute. I'll call you back." The young man was usually reserved in expressing emotions when communicating with his father, but the colonel cherished his son and tried to do everything for him. Sergei, while not overly affectionate, had enough perceptiveness. It seemed to him that his son was hiding something. Dinas spoke too quickly, omitted words, and showed a subtle nervousness. Sergei was overcome by a feeling of anxiety and misunderstanding. His intuition did not deceive him. He called his son's number many times, but Dinas remained stubbornly silent. However, after some time, there was another call from unknown individuals. The same mocking voice struck a nerve with the colonel like lightning. "So, have you found the money? When will you start paying?" "I need to talk to my son again," Sergei pleaded. "You'll talk when you make the first payments," exclaimed the man in an authoritative tone. Instant response. "But how?" "It's impossible," Sergei said. "What's impossible here?" "Withdraw the money from your accounts and transfer it." "You don't have time," the man demanded in a commanding tone, and then he laughed loudly, insolent. But it was clear that the man was not joking in a good way, and the colonel took it all very close to heart. "Why is my son in trouble, and she continues to live like nothing happened?" thought Sergei about his stepdaughter. In his mind he had a crazy thought, which in the first few seconds even he was afraid of. He thought of throwing his stepdaughter into the cell of an extortionist's acquaintance, and he did it without thinking about the consequences. At that moment, all of Sergei's thoughts were occupied with his own son, and there was no room for another man's child. Done and done. The colonel considered himself in the colony and did whatever he pleased. Sophia was only 16, and she experienced such a chilling horror, which even an adult can hardly cope with. The door rattled shut behind her back. She looked inside the cell and staggered. For a moment, Sophia thought she was going to faint. It was a great effort to stay on her feet. And then the girl looked around with a hazy look around her. The picture was not a happy one. Ahead lay a row of upper and lower bunks, which seemed as if it would to go on forever. Dozens of male eyes looked at her, some with a smirk, some with curiosity, and most with lustful greed. "Wow, what are we getting such a sweet gift for?" heard a hoarse male voice from the depths of the cell. Before Sophia could orient herself and realize where the voice was coming from, an unshaven, shaggy-haired man immediately jumped off the bunk and appeared like a devil in front of her. He devoured Sophia with his eyes from top to bottom and whistled at the pleasure that lay ahead of him. And there was a lot to look at. Sophia's slender figure and her beautiful face and curly hair was a sight to behold. "Can I go first? It's my birthday today," breathing heavily, said the man and pulled the girl to him with force. Sophia felt like a bird caught in a cage, but could not even utter a word. Her tongue went numb, and her legs became absorbent cotton. Tall, powerful as a rock, the man towered over Sophia like a wild beast about to pounce on the prey he had just caught, and he would have pounced. But suddenly, behind Sophia's back, the voices of other similarly suffering prisoners were heard. "Why are you first? Are you in charge? We want to go too." Laughter erupted from all sides. The worst convicts jumped off their bunks and rushed forward, not fully realizing what was happening. As soon as they lined up around Sophia, her eyes went black. She felt as if 100 hands were dragging her straight to hell. She had already prepared herself mentally for death because she realized that if what the prisoners had planned happened, she would never live. And at that moment a voice sounded, which made everyone shudder. "Oh, come on, stop it. Are you men or beasts? Most of you have wives and children on the outside. Shame on you acting like this. She's just a child. Let her go at once." The voice was soft but insistent, and it belonged to a thin, small man of small stature. He waved his hand. Amazingly, as if by magic, the shouting and laughter stopped at that very second. The prisoners froze, waiting to see what this unassuming-looking man would say. Apparently recognized as an authority among them, the man continued to speak in the same low voice. "After all, it seems that this girl was planted to us for a reason. We need to talk to the man, find out what's going on. What did you do? You attacked a defenseless girl. I'll punish you for this sort of thing in a way that won't be tolerated." "Crow, I'm sorry, we're nothing." A man called Crow got off his bunk and shuffled his feet on the floor like an old man, approached the girl. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sophia," the girl said quietly, like a hunted animal. She had no hope of rescue and looked fearfully at the strange man who had saved her from imminent disaster. "My name is Ivan Voronov. Let's get acquainted. Yes, don't be afraid. No one will do anything bad to you here. Don't think that all prisoners are evil and cruel people. Each of them has had a difficult fate, but that doesn't mean they've lost their good human qualities. Often free people are worse than prisoners. Take Sergei, for example. He's a disgusting man. He's the one who sent you here, isn't he?" Sophia felt as if she were in a fever at such words. How could this man, who was practically an old man to her, know about their relationship with Sergei? She nodded her head and asked timidly, "Where do you know about me?" "I know a lot. Lived a fair bit and seen even more." Suddenly, Sophia felt Voronov's penetrating gaze on her. He was carefully studying her face. No, it wasn't a lustful look like the one recently given by all the inmates. It was different. Sophia couldn't quite understand it. But her surprise knew no bounds when the man unexpectedly asked, "Isn't your dad named Boris?" "Yes, Boris. Only they don't call him. They called him. I don't even remember his face. He disappeared without a trace while hunting. That's what Mom said," replied Sophia, and a tear involuntarily rolled down her cheek. She didn't expect from herself that she would become so emotional and cry like a child. "I'm all alone. My father's been gone for a long time, and my mom passed away a year ago. My stepfather hates me. How am I supposed to live on?" At this point, Voronov abruptly turned around, looked directly into Sophia's eyes, and said quietly, "Your father is alive. Boris is alive." The girl's eyes widened. She looked at the elderly man in astonishment and couldn't believe the truth of his words. How was that possible? Mom said that Dad disappeared while hunting in the forest. So where is he then? Voronov took Sophia's hand and held it firmly in his. "I don't know what kind of fairy tales your mom told you, but I sat with him in the colony last time. We had plenty of time to share our life stories. Boris told me that he, his wife, and Sergei were classmates. Then Boris and Sergei, by fate, became colleagues, both working in the police force. Sergei always envied successful Boris, the best student in school, the best at work. And in personal life, Boris was also lucky. Beauties always noticed him. Your mom, Nadezhda, was such a beauty. Sergei was interested in her too, but Nadezhda chose your father. Boris was advancing in his career, while Sergei remained in a lower position. After Boris received another promotion, Sergei, consumed by envy, decided to frame his colleague. He framed him so effectively that Boris ended up in prison for a long time for official misconduct and bribery. But Zubov, your stepfather, thought that wasn't enough. He told Nadezhda, your mother, that her husband Boris died in prison from pneumonia. He forged death documents and even took Nadezhda for himself. That's the story. Her husband hadn't even cooled down, and she went and married another. Sophia, holding her breath, listened to the elderly inmate and swallowed bitter tears. Don't speak ill of my mom, she was good. Okay, sorry, your truth. You need to deal with your own soul first, and then poke your nose into others, said Voronov. Sophia perceived the man's story as a revelation that deeply affected her consciousness. With a pounding heart, she asked, "And where is my father now? Do you know?" "I don't know, girl. I only know one thing. You don't need to fear Colonel Sergi anymore. There will always be another force against any force. Remember my word. Not every inmate would act as he did. He's been a thorn in everyone's side for a long time, and he will be punished for his crimes. How he treated you, not every prisoner would do. He will be punished for his crimes." Sergi had just finished speaking these words when the loud jingling of keys was heard, and the door to the cell opened with a crash. Sergi rushed into the cell. With a bewildered look, he kept scanning the cell over and over again, probably looking for the stepdaughter's body. "Where is?" he asked with a trembling voice. Finally, he saw Sophia, alive and unharmed, next to Voronov, and he sighed with relief. The colonel grabbed the girl's hand and dragged her out of the cell. "Let's go. Let's get out of here. Everything's fine with you, right?" he repeated tirelessly. Waking up in the morning in his office from the alcohol he had drunk, Zubov realized with horror what he had done to his stepdaughter and what it could cost him. "I could be imprisoned for this." The only thought echoed in his head. He grabbed Sophia's hand and, looking into her eyes, whispered, "Just don't tell anyone that you were in the cell, okay? We're family. Promise?" Everyone can make a mistake in this life. The girl remained stubbornly silent. After learning about her father, she hated her stepfather even more. The colonel, without stopping, kept talking to Sophia. "Why are you silent? Planning to accuse me of something? You'll regret it." He squeezed Sophia's hand so tightly that it seemed like the bones would crack. Even in such a precarious situation, with his fate hanging by a thread, the stepfather couldn't do without threats and insults. But after what happened to her, Sophia was no longer afraid of anything. "Tell me, where is my father now?" she unexpectedly asked. The colonel turned pale and his lower lip trembled. "But your father is dead. And—" The girl interrupted her stepfather mid-sentence. "Don't lie to me. I know everything." Zubov wondered, what could this old acquaintance Voronov have told her? After a few seconds, Sergi said, "And if I tell you where he might be, will you promise not to testify against me? Do you promise?" The door of a small apartment in an old paneled building was opened by a gray-haired, slender man with eyes that stared at her intensely with an empty gaze. "Are you Boris?" The man shuddered all over, trying to recognize familiar features of people who had once been present in his life. "I'm Sophia, Nadezhda's daughter," the girl said, impaled, not knowing how to proceed in such a situation. A barely noticeable tear rolled down the man's cheek. Then he took the girl's hand into his and said, "Yes, I'm Boris. I know you hate me for not coming and not looking for you. This is true, and you have every right to hate me, my daughter." Boris said, wiping away tears, "I had everything. A beloved family, a great job, happiness in life, but everything shattered into pieces in an instant. I didn't foresee the impending disaster. I didn't notice how a friend turned into an enemy. Ended up in prison for a long time, losing everything, including myself. I couldn't forgive my wife, Nadezhda, who simply believed Sergi's words about my death and didn't even bother to find me. I'm guilty, Sophia, before you, very guilty. My wife's departure broke me so much that resentment took over me, and I decided to just give up on the past. I acted unmanly, and now I live alone, like a dog, unwanted by anyone. Forgive me, my daughter, if you can." Sophia silently listened to her father and understood that she would no longer be alone. Her inner world seemed to be screaming about it. "I forgave you a long time ago, father. Just let me see and hear you." Boris hugged Sophia tightly. "Everything will be fine, so we will live together." That's it. Such a kind and touching story. Thanks to everyone who watched to the end. I would appreciate a subscription to the channel and a like for this video. Also, watch the next videos.